Hello there, witches, wizards, non-binary spellcasters of all races and species. Welcome to Select for Inspection, the video series where I talk to you kindly and softly, and we look at my magic decks together. Today, we're going to be looking at a deck that I've owned for quite a long time. I originally saw this deck on a YouTube channel called The Mana Source, hosted by a guy who goes by Wedge. And this was a $50 budget deck originally that I saw and I thought was really interesting. And it's right in my wheelhouse, as you'll see soon, anybody who's ever played Magic with me before. And so I picked it up. And over the past few years, I've slowly made some changes to it. And, well, let's go from there. Let's see what's inside of our lovely, lovely Satin Tower box, Ultra Pro Satin Tower today. We have Muldrotha, the Gravetide. And so if you're familiar to Commander, you probably already know who this is. She's super popular. Sultai, 3 colorless. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. And she's a 6/6. So, the original build for this deck was just a general good stuff graveyard recursive deck. And I enjoyed it, and I made some modifications to it as I went along. And as time passed, I had kind of another deck in the same colors. I had just a straight green-black deck. And so I started having to compete with card slots to a degree. And I decided that I would need to diverge. I couldn't have a Marin Graveyard Reanimator deck and a Muldrotha Graveyard Reanimator deck. I just didn't want to have to buy multiple copies of the same card for Commander. So I decided to turn Muldrotha into, because if we look, it says a permanent type. So we can do Planeswalkers. And so I decided, let's do Sultai Super Friends. So what I've been working on over the past few years is slowly picking up Planeswalkers, because I'm a broke boy, it's a slow process, and turning this into a pretty dirtle value fest Sultai mid-range control deck. You just play tons and tons and tons of value generators. There's only about 11 or 12 walkers in the deck right now. There's 4 or 5 that are critically needed to get this deck to be a solid Super Friends deck. But we'll get there. In the meantime, we're still just kind of a dirtle. We are basically a basic bitch Muldrotha deck with some heavy Planeswalker overtones. So let's dive into it. We're going to start off with our Planeswalker package. And starting from the top, we have Garrick, Cursed Huntsman. Garrick, like all the 6-mana walkers that have been printed recently, is just kind of a win condition in a bag. He comes into play, you can immediately make 2/2/2 tokens, and when either of those tokens die, you get to put 2 loyalty counters on him. So he comes in, makes a pair of 2/2s, which is good. He can immediately also go down to 2 loyalty to destroy just a creature? Yeah, target creature, draw a card. It's fine. And his ultimate, like almost all 6-mana walker ultimates, just basically reads win the game. All your stuff gets huge forever and ever. You run Ugin the Ineffable, because he does almost the exact same thing. Upticks to create a token, a 2/2 token. When that token dies, you get to draw, you basically manifest a token from the top of your library. Downtick to destroy a permanent. And he has a neat synergy with our commander, because one of the permanent types we're allowed to cast once per turn from the graveyard is Artifact. Ugin has a static ability that discounts all colorless spells that we cast by 2. So if we have artifacts in the graveyard to recast, they cost 2 less if we have Ugin in play. Next on our list is a card that I just realized I had a copy of. It's Sorin Markov. Sorin Markov is extremely powerful just for his -3 ability. He's another big 6-mana walker. His upticking is not that impressive. His downticking, or his ultimate, is hilarious, but the ability to just downtick him makes somebody's life total 10. And then if he dies, you can just recast him from your yard if you have Muldrotha in play at some point. So you can just constantly threaten to ding people down to 10, which is hopefully enough to kill them with some dorky tokens you've made off of your other big dumb walkers. I really enjoy playing this deck, by the way. We have 6-mana Vraska. She does, again, kind of the exact same template as Ugin, as Garrick. Uptick, make a token. Downtick, blow up a thing, get a gold token. -10, win the game. Targeted player's life total becomes 1. So she can come in at 6 loyalty, uptick, uptick, ultimate. You have 2/2/2s with menace minimum, well, hopefully, and an opponent whose life total is 1. So she's good. She gets there. She gets it done. We got old Ob Nixilis Reignited. Again, a pretty standard template of recent Planeswalker design. Uptick, do a good thing. Downtick, do a good thing. -8. It's interesting. It's not so win the gamey. This guy, again, is part of the reason why I thought Sultai Super Friends with Muldrotha might be okay. You can just use this as like a 5-mana removal spell, draw a card pretty repeatably from the graveyard if you just have tons of mana, which this deck generally produces, given enough time. I realized while I was going through this deck there are many things missing that should be there, but ain't that always the case. 5-mana Vraska. Comes in at 5 loyalty. Downticks to blow up a thing. Ultimates to win the game. Makes some assassin tokens that have death touch for creatures and also players, basically. One of the more critical, occasionally, planeswalkers in this deck is our Tamiyo here. The ability to just like dig for certain cards with her uptick is alright. It helps fill our graveyard though, like she comes in, goes immediately to 6 loyalty, dumps 4 into the yard more than likely, or we get lucky and hit what we're looking for. And her ability to loop things back is really nice. We run an Aventural's Disc in our artifact package, and being able to disc, return it a couple of times is usually backbreaking. And she has a static ability that's not unmentionable. We're running a couple Kioras. This is one of them. The glare is brutal, I'm so sorry. All the Kioras are pretty wimpy. This one's no change from that. But she's there because, again, she fills our graveyard pretty quickly. She also can ramp us. Her ultimate is okay. It makes 3 8/8s that fight a bunch of things when they come into play. You get an emblem that makes your creatures fight things whenever they come into play. She's alright, but her downtick is fill our yard, downtick, fill our yard. She'll die, we can replay her. It's just utility, staying on theme. We run a Liliana of the Veil because I own one and it's good. Again, like, turn 2 or turn 3 Liliana and 1-on-1 commander, which is I normally play with my buddy Paul. It's pretty backbreaking, especially in a deck where like discarding cards is no big deal. Like whatever, gets pretty one-sided pretty quickly. Generates a ton of value. Card advantage. We run 3 CMC Ashiok. It's not really that good of a card, but it's a planeswalker. Like, occasionally you steal a cool creature with it, but not that exciting. And we run the X-Cost Nissa. Because it can be a 3-mana walker, it can be a big walker, it's fine. It's kind of the definition of meh, but it's on the good side of meh. And that's it for our Planeswalker count. There are quite a few other things I need to procure for this package. The 3-mana Ashiok that makes you mill 4, or you can make someone mill 4, and obviously you're going to choose yourself. And then exile everyone's graveyards is perfect for this deck. I need to get one. There's no excuse for me not having one, except, like, I don't know. I'm very busy. Leave me alone. There's a few Lilianas we need, some of the bigger ones. Moving on from there, let's talk about creatures. Running Spore Frog, Fog Frog, it's really good. Fog Frog helps us incapacitate creature attacking base decks. We're running Caustic Caterpillar, lets you pay 2 to sack it, blow up an artifact or enchantment. We have Ol Sakura Tribelder, sacrifice to ramp. Lotus Cobra, because we can play lands from our graveyard and it's good. Fertilid, because it generates us land drops over time and it goes to the graveyard, we can return it. Burnished Heart is hilarious in this deck. Let me point out some key creatures as we go here. So Spore Frog is key because you can just sacrifice it every turn with Muldrotha in play and just fog every fog a combat step every turn rotation. Burnished Heart is an artifact and a creature, so if you have enough mana, you can sacrifice Burnished Heart for 3 mana, replay it from your graveyard as your creature for turn for 3 mana, sacrifice it again for 3 mana, replay it from your graveyard for 3 mana as your artifact for turn, sacrifice it again. And there have been plenty of games where I've established this slow, dumb loop until all the basics are out of my library. You run Fleshbag Marauder because you want to just have the ability to start controlling the board pretty quickly if you're going to be playing Planeswalkers. We have the Flip Nissa, just kind of a shitty Wood Elves, but it's a Planeswalker, it's on themes. Nyx Weaver. We have some other key creatures in here. So I'm running Fleshbag Marauder and Plague Crafter. I know there are more functional copies of these cards in existence. I've slimmed down to 2. There's a lot of cards I'm going to have to start cutting as I continue to slim down. Stinkweed Imp has Dredge 5, that's important. So there's Farhaven Elf, Wood Elves, and there's the elf that harrows you now when it comes into play. I kind of need all of those, I just don't have them. Reclamation Sage is nice. It's also a nice reanimation target and find a sacrifice over and over. Kill all those annoying artifacts and enchantments. Gerard's a big boy who gets to do big things. We like Gerard. Silent Arbiter protects our walkers, only letting 1 creature attack each turn. Solemn Simulacrum, the worst artwork. I like it, but it's just new and so I have to hate it because I'm a magic boomer. Just kidding. Gravebreaker Lamia is a neat recent addition. The ability to put a card in your graveyard, just any card, put it into your graveyard and discounts casting things from your graveyard is really nice in this deck. Really synergistic. Muldrifter, because you gotta have it. Acidic Slime, because you gotta have it. Sidisi, another repeatable tutor. We can play this for 5, sack it, repeat it from the graveyard with Muldrotha. And there is a lock in this deck, and we'll get to the lock. It's not some super amazing, crazy CEDH stacks lock, but it makes me giggle. Shriekmaw, Avenger of Zendikar, Agent of Treachery is a nice hit. Butcher of Malakir, I have a copy of Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos, but I think I only have space for one of those effects in this deck. And given this is a recursive deck, I think making it a creature is a good idea. It's 7 mana, it's extremely expensive, but we're not trying to do anything very quickly in this deck. We have Terastodon and Woodfall Primus at the very tippy top end of our curve, because the enter the battlefield effects are very strong on both of those cards. We have sack outlets in the deck, we can repeat it. So one of the things I was talking about noticing, I'm not running a Birds of Paradise, and I have a spare copy. It's just so hard. I'm trying to make this more Planeswalker focused, And I know that I'm going to need to have some amount of acceleration, and I should probably just be running the very best bits, which means I think that Birds of Paradise will just always make the cut for this deck, so it has to be in. We're through most of it now. We have a smattering of enchantments to go through. Mystic Grimoire is great. It's a great Magic card. It's wonderful even in decks that have to play it fairly. In our stupid deck, where you can just pay a blue every turn and keep bringing it back and never worrying about... I'm sorry, it's supposed to be a relaxing video. It's good. It's nice. Your cumulative upkeep goes up. You don't care. You just let it die. It's not an accident. It's not wrong. It's a happy thing, because you get to replay it for a blue every turn. Running a Seal of Primordium and a Seal of Doom as just a pair of control spells we can repeatedly cast from our graveyard. We're doubling up across the board, so we have like some creatures that destroy things, some artifacts that destroy things, some enchantments that destroy things. We're really trying to get to a redundant level of removal. Monastery Siege, you're always choosing cons. Cons allows you to draw an additional card and then discard a card during your draw step, which is awesome. It's just like in our super recur everything deck, it just draws you an extra card a turn. Propaganda, because leave our planeswalkers alone, you filthy heathen. Secrets of the Dead, because again, we're just a dumb, dirtily value deck and we just want to draw cards. Eldritch Reborn, because this is basically a planeswalker. This is like a pretty decent stand-in for like a modern day planeswalker design. Just comes into play, upticks, does a good thing, upticks, does a good thing, ultimates, does an awesome thing. Yeah, it's a good one. And being able to just bring it back every few turns with Muldrotha really just helps add another layer of stack to the table. And then we're running my favorite card in the deck. Oh boy, can we just get a close-up? Can we just get the rest of the stuff out of here? Let's just take a look. Let's see. Come on, phone. There it is. Oh, look at this big, dumb battle cruiser of a Magic card. Oh, drink it in, boys. That's an 8-mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, counter that spell and put a depletion counter on Decree of Silence. If there are 3 or more depletion counters on Decree of Silence, sacrifice it. It cycles for a blue and 4. And whenever you cycle it, you counter target spell. So this sits in your hand, and ideally you're playing one-on-one, but you can do dirty things with it in multiplayer too. In multiplayer, you probably don't want to be playing this super aggressively unless you have a lot of other lock pieces in play. Because you are able to, at some point, cycle this to your graveyard to draw a card and counter a spell. And then during your turn, or any turn after that, it's your turn, try to play it from your graveyard. And you get to just pay 8 mana and counter the next 3 spells your opponent would cast, or your opponents would cast. If you combine that with another lock piece, like Spore Frog, recurring that every turn, that's the ball game. I pulled this off against my dear friend Sage for the first time ever, and I knew that Decree of Silence was good, but I had never hit a Decree of Silence plus Spore Frog against somebody with no cards in hand, and it felt really dirty, and it took me forever to win the game, but I love this card. I love that card. Next up, we have a few artifacts to get through. Wayfarer's Bauble for our repeatable rampant growth. Nihil Spellbomb isn't a piece of graveyard hate, so eventually I'm going to be running 3. The 3-mana Ashiok we talked about earlier, that you can make yourself mill 4 and then it exiles all opponents' graveyards. You can do that over and over again. So we're going to run that. The Nihil Spellbomb. This is also a repeatable card draw. We have Executioner's Capsule. Again, we're just stacking up on multiple kinds of permanents to be removal pieces. Soul Ring because Soul Ring, Lightning Greaves because Lightning Greaves, Mind Stone because Mind Stone, we can recur it. We are running a pair of Signets. I think eventually I would like to cut these for another like sacrificial piece of ramp. Like the Wood Elves that like... So I talked about the Wood Elves at Harrowsy earlier. It's a 3-mana 1/1 elf that when it comes into play sacrifices a land and goes and gets 2 lands into play untapped. That would be amazing for our deck that can play lands from the graveyard with our commander. So I may end up replacing this non-synergistic ramp with synergistic ramp for what our deck is doing. Commander Sphere, because it's a draw outlet, it's a mana. Phyrexian Altar. I wanted a way to just sacrifice creatures for free. I don't know if this is good in this deck. It might get cut. I think eventually, especially if I get a hold of the 4-mana Vraska, that's now just like $2 or less, the one that was in Guilds of Ravnica, that can just sacrifice any permanent on an uptick. Once I get that, I might get rid of the altar. And we have an Veneral's Disc, because you can do dumb loops with it, with Cameo, etc. That is our artifact package. I know you guys like seeing my package. We're going to take a quick look at some lands that are in here not because they produce mana. These are lands that, yeah, of course they produce mana, but that's not the reason they're in here. Lumbering Falls, I wanted to run a manland or two just to help, like, you know, in a pinch, this some chump block for a Planeswalker so that Planeswalker can ult. Another reason I'm not sure if the altar is necessary is I'm running a Phyrexian Tower, as well as just some other, like, incidental sack outlets, like Gerard, and I don't need to be sacking that many creatures. Ghost Quarter. Eventually, I'm going to get a Strip Mine and a Wasteland for this deck, plus a Azusa, so I can Strip Mine somebody 3 times a turn and just giggle, giggle, giggle. I'm also going to get a Ramanap Excavator and a maybe a Crucible of Worlds if it's necessary. And I'm going to giggle, giggle, giggle as I deploy fucking Decree of Silence and then Strip Mine somebody 3 times. And we laugh. We all laugh and we all play Magic together. And we play Bojuka Bog. So eventually we're going to have Nihil Spellbomb, 3-mana Ashiok, Bojuka Bog. And as I go up in like utility lands, I'm probably going to end up running a copy of... And abilities let me play multiple lands per turn, which I really need some of in this deck. I need an Azusa Lost But Seeking. I need some other, like, multiple land drop enablers per turn. I'm going to get more utility lands and probably run Expedition Map also. And in our final slot, ladies and gentlemen, we have the non-permanent gang. So in a Muldrotha deck, you really want the majority of your deck to be permanents so you can, you know, do what your commander is good at. But a few non-permanent cards are just too good not to run. So we're running Entomb, because this is just like basically a demonic tutor, a strictly better demonic tutor for your deck. You gotta have your commander in play, but whatever. It's instant speed. Running Life from the Loam, just for the ability to make sure we hit our land drops, which is important for this deck. This deck is not fast. This deck, I think, is a really good way to test the meta of like a new group of people that I'm with, because really focused, targeted decks, like proactive combo decks, or just proactive like stacks decks, just anything that's trying to climb the CEDH ladder will prey upon this deck, no problem. Any deck that's just like a dirtily C tier, like, you know, homebrew, super casual commander deck, I think this Muldrotha deck preys on those a whole lot. It's like, oh, you're just this dirtily value engine? Well, I dirtily value engine harder. So Life from the Loam. It also has Dredge 3, which is incidentally amazing. Villainous Wealth, because it is hilarious. Villainous Wealthing people for like 15, 16, 20 mana is like one of my favorite things in the world. Running Sultide Charm, the versatility on it's nice. It helps us dig, fills our graveyard, we can blow things up with it. Might get cut eventually for some Planeswalker. Running Factor Fiction, because it's just a 4-mana draw 5. Your opponent gets to choose a pile to put into your graveyard and a pile to put into your hand, but just like our graveyard is our hand, bros. On the subject of Fact or Fiction, I need to get a Gifts Ungiven in here also. Gifts Ungiven would be a good card for this deck. We have Gerard's Orders and Final Parting. Just a couple ways to tutor specific things into our graveyard. Final Parting is almost always going and getting Spore Frog and Decree of Silence. So, where do we go from here? Well, let's talk about upgrades. So I think the next round of upgrades for this deck is going to have that Strip Mine, Azusa Lost but Seeking, the 3-mana Ashiok I could be talking about so much. What else do we need? We need to get a Lotus Petal for this deck. Lotus Petal is really good. Just allows you to get a little bump in mana every now and again. You know, we all need a little bump from time to time, just occasionally. Probably the baubles, like a Mishra's Bauble, Urza's Bauble. Urza's Bauble is so much cheaper. Just like 0 mana, draw a card every turn. It's too good to pass up on. I think that's it, gang. I hope this is what you dirty heathens were hoping you'd get. It's me talking about magic and such. There was something else I just saw recently that'd be really good for this deck. There's like a Commander Legends card that whenever a card leaves your graveyard, or whenever any number of cards leaves your graveyard, you get to make a 2/2 zombie. So with Muldrotha, every time we used her ability, we'd make a 2/2 zombie. So that's pretty neato. Well, alright.